So this series follows our main character, Amelia, who at the beginning of the book, her twin sister is brutally murdered, and she's murdered in a way that they've seen other women. They're all witches. I'm gonna try this again because I'm not doing a very good job of explaining what this book's about. Rewind. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my favorites so far this year. This is a video that I did last year. I don't know if that was the first time I ever did it, but I've been keeping track for a couple of years of like my favorites by month. And so it's time to do a mid check-in, talk about the books that I loved each month so far. Going from January to June. I will leave everything down below, linked per usual. So let's just dive in. So in January, I don't think I was able to choose because I have two, like I have a slash here, but the first one was Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong. This is the second in a duology by this author. The first one is These Violent Delights. It's a reimagining, a 20s reimagining of the Romeo and Juliet story set in Shanghai, except for it's two rival gangs, and they are, the kids of the leaders of these gangs are Roma and Juliet, and they had a thing in the past, and the book starts with people in both of their gangs kind of being murdered, and they first off they think it's the other gang who's doing it, and then they both start to investigate and realize it's not, and so they team up to try to figure out what's going on because it's affecting both of them. It's kind of creepy and goes down a rabbit hole. I picked up this one and actually the other one that is kind of like a favorite for this month in my very first vlog of the year, which I'll link above, which was books that I wish I had read the previous year. This one was, like I said, a duology, so this was the second book in the series, and I was really debating on it because I really only liked the first book a little bit. I gave the first book 3 stars, but I became obsessed with this book. It kind of took over my soul, and I ended up buying it and loving it, and so this definitely got 5 stars, but this one was a fantastic book. I really, really enjoyed it. And then the other book, which I mentioned was also in that vlog, was The Very Secret Society of Witches by Sangu Mandana. This is a very light fantasy story where our main character is a witch, and in this world witches are supposed to like kind of stay hidden and not like meet up with other witches because too much power at one spot is not good. And so she gets a notice from some guy that he is like the caretaker of this house, and in this house are 3 young witches, and they're causing mischief, and he needs help to train them. And so she basically shows up to this house of misfits and starts training these 3 young girls. And then of course there's a little romance because there is a grumpy librarian at this house that doesn't trust anybody, and they kind of strike up a friendship as well. So it's really, really sweet. I love the story. It's really nice, easy. If you're trying to figure out fantasy for the first time, this is a great story. It's cozy fantasy, which is fantastic. There's not really any crazy high stakes. So if that's what you're looking for, perfect. I loved it. Snuggle down. I just couldn't get enough. So these are my 2 favorites for January. For February, this was the month that I really kind of started diving into fantasy romance for the first time. Not really. I mean, I always loved fantasy romance, but like kind of let it take over my life. So my favorite that month was the first book in the Fortuna Sworn series by KJ Sutton, which was Fortuna Sworn. I read this for a vlog as well. This one was for the BookTube Made Me series that I've been doing. I did an installment on Becca from Becca and the Books, and this one was in there. And I thought I was going to enjoy it because I'd heard she really loved it, and she's also a big Sarah J. Maas fan. And so I thought that if you liked, or I've heard if you liked Sarah J. Maas and that kind of world building, like ACOTAR specifically, then you would enjoy this. And I did. It was great. Also 5 stars. I think everything in this video got 5 stars. We can just assume that now. And I thought this was so good. So we follow our main character, Fortuna, who is a nightmare. And basically what that means is that she has this magical ability where she touches someone, she can instantly figure out what their greatest fear in life is, and she's able to use it against them. So beginning of this book, her brother has been missing for 2 years. Everyone's basically just given up on the fact that he is still alive, but she won't. She's convinced her brother's still alive there somewhere. And so one day this fae shows up and basically says, like, I know what happened to your brother. I can help you figure out what's going on, but I need you to marry me in order to do that. And so she's like, okay, fine. And so we go from there. There's a competition of sorts kind of in this book. So if you like kind of like the first ACOTAR, specifically the ending of the first ACOTAR, that vibe is definitely in this book. But this is a definitely harder hitting book. So beware, I would check out trigger warnings. She has content warnings at the beginning of her book. So this one, there's a lot of themes of things. There's not a lot of like on page stuff. I'll just kind of list them off so you kind of know what's going on. And here this has themes of slavery. That's the biggest one, I would say. Profanity, spiders, an eating disorder, sexual harassment, an abusive relationship, violence, cannibalism, and animal death, sex, and murder. So just kind of be wary of some of those. I would say, like I said, a lot of those are themes. You don't see a lot of them on page. Slavery, I would say, is the biggest one, as well as sexual harassment and an abusive relationship. Those are the others. Those are like the main three from what I gathered when I read this. But I actually enjoyed our characters. I've read the second one now because of this, but February is when I discovered Fortuna Sworn, and now I'm obsessed. So this is my favorite in February. The next month was March, and so the book that kind of took the highlight for me was Kingdom of the Curse by Carrie Maniscalco. So this is the second in the Kingdom of the Wicked series. I did also read Kingdom of the Wicked this month, but I enjoyed the third one, or the second one, more than the first one. So this book follows our main character Amelia, and she and her family are witches. And the book starts with her twin sister Victoria being brutally murdered in a way that is kind of serial killer-esque. There's been a few women who've been killed very similarly. And so Amelia kind of like takes her grief and rage and tries to figure out what happened. And there's a guy named Wrath, who is one of the princes of hell, and he is also trying to figure out what happened to Amelia's sister, because he has other like ultimatums as to why he's figuring this out. So the two of them end up pairing up together to figure out what happened to her sister. This book takes it into a different turn. That just kind of touches the surface of what the first book is about. The second book just kind of like takes what you think you know and like expands it tenfold. So I love this writing. I love these characters. The first one was so good. I really didn't expect anything going into it. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to think about it. I had randomly picked it up and I was reading it because it was part of a Patreon buddy read. And I think it was her, actually from Frolic Fiction, who ended up not really enjoying it. And I couldn't stop reading it. So I thought that was kind of humorous because she and I have very similar tastes in like very specific things. But I loved this, so I kept reading, clearly, because I've now finished the entire trilogy within, like, I think a month of reading it. So I really enjoyed this one. This was my favorite of March. And just to kind of, like, piggyback on that, in April, my favorite was Kingdom of the Feared, which was the third book in this series. So I read these on audiobook. I got them from my library. I own the first two. I'm waiting for the third one to come out in paperback, which should be near the end of this year. But I cannot stop thinking about this. I love the characters. They've taken over my soul. I want to reread them because I tabbed the crap out of this book and I tabbed the crap out of my Kindle edition of the third book. But the first book, I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, so I really want to reread it to see, now that I know where the story's going, if I can pick up on a bunch of stuff. So I loved this series. So March, April was Kingdom of the Wicked series obsession. So this was great. This was so great. In May, I have two for this one as well, because if I went by just my favorite from that month, I read Akamath again by Sarah J. Maas, and that one would for sure be my favorite. But because this was a reread, I'm not sure if that should count, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But if I was going on just the books that I read, I love Akamath. I love the ACOTAR series. Like I said, this was a reread. I reread the first two in the series, and I'm still actually kind of somewhere in the middle of the third one. I kind of took a break from it. Not on purpose, I just had other things that I was planning on doing. So maybe one day we'll come back to the reread of that one. But I really enjoyed my time rereading this one. This is my favorite book in the series. It continues to be my favorite book in the series. I love this series so much, but because I reread this one, I'm not sure this one counts. So if I wasn't allowed to use a reread, then it would be The Off Limits Rule by Sarah Adams. This is a fun brother's best friend contemporary clean romance. And the reason I read this was because one of the girls that I used to work with, she was obsessed. She loves this author. And this was one of the first books that she kind of like dived into. She's like me. She loves banter between our main characters, and the banter and the sass between them in this book is amazing. For our two main characters, like I said, it's a brother's best friend situation. Our main female lead is trying to kind of get back on her feet. She's living with her brother. She just broke up with a guy that she wasn't really emotionally tied to. She does have a son, so she's trying to figure out and kind of start over. She is a hairdresser, and the best friend is kind of known as like a playboy, maybe not a playboy, but like he kind of plays the field a little bit because he used to be in a very serious relationship that ended abruptly, and that kind of hurt him, so he never let himself have feelings. But he's always wanted a serious relationship, but of course our main female lead's brother always sees him as that and kind of like warns him away from her. And of course it's the two of them as they're fighting feelings for each other, and because the brother's involved. So I thought this was fun. It was cute. I think I read this in like 2 days, a day probably at this point, so it was really, really fast, but I'd never read it before, so that's kind of why I wanted to mention this one, because if I wasn't allowed to use a reread, which I feel like I'm not allowed to, this would be the one that I really enjoyed. 5 stars, super cute. And then in June, I jumped on the Fourth Wing hype train, and I read Fourth Wing, and that was definitely my favorite for June. June, I read significantly less books. I've kind of gone downhill a little bit as far as the amount of books that I've been reading, but I've been really enjoying the books that I've been reading. And this one I read because my best friend Lauren was like, I'm obsessed with this. I need you to be obsessed with this too. And it was already kind of on my radar. I don't know how it could not be on my radar, but everyone was talking about this book. I'd watched like a reel somewhere that said that if you liked Sarah J. Maas's like obsessive, addictive writing style, then you would enjoy this one, and that kind of sold me there. And then Lauren told me to read it, so it was just kind of like icing on the cake. So I picked this one up and ended up reading this when I was on vacation. I have the Kindle edition, and I just adore this book. I thought it was so good. I'm not a huge person when it comes to fantasy books that loves books about dragons. Like, I don't purposely steer clear of them, but I usually don't go towards them. But I also love How to Train Your Dragon, and I've heard if you like that, then you will enjoy this one as well. And I get that. The character of Tairn and the character of Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon, the sass level is the same. So this book, let me kind of explain to you if you don't know and you've been living under a rock. This book, it follows our main character Violet, and she has a chronic illness, so she is chronically fatigued, and she comes from a general, her mom, who insists that she be a writer. In this world, you are part of this college and you kind of go down different tracks. She's been trained her whole life to be a scribe. That's what her dad was. And then at the last minute, her mom insists on her going as a writer. Her sister and her brother were both writers, and it's like, you're a writer or else. And so she goes there. She's already kind of like weak and is not well versed in the world of writers because she never thought she was going to be one. So she's already at a disadvantage, but she gets into this college, and there's a guy named Xaden. And Xaden is the son of this guy who was like the head of the rebellion so many years ago. And so everyone's like, well, he's going to try to kill you. And of course, it's the two of them. Enemies to lovers. There's a childhood best friend that kind of is thrown in there, but like the attention to detail when it comes to this world, and the fact that I was able to follow it, and also the fact that these dragons were so entertaining. Like I said, Tairn is like a sass king. I think he's hilarious. So I really enjoyed this book. It kind of took me heart and soul. I understand the hype with it. I'm on the hype train, and I loved it. This was definitely my favorite for June by like a wide margin. And that's it. That's a look at some of my favorite books so far this year. By month, I will, of course, do a second installment of this in December when we get to the end of the year and kind of talk about the books that were my favorites for the second half of the year. I'm seeing that there's probably going to be a lot of fantasy romance. That's just my prediction based on my attitude and what I want right now. So that's my prediction for the next half. Let's see if it's true. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what your favorite or favorites have been so far this year. I would love to know all of your bookish thoughts down below. And of course, if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, let me know your thoughts on those as well. So if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there as well as other fun bookish links. So check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!